if I now try to answer the question I asked you concerning Leonardo Flores's own definition of what e-poetry is, I suppose that you've watched his video, and that you can, of course, define digital poetry as the way to use digital tools in the creation and dissemination of the performances of the poem. And Leonardo Flores defines e-poetry as the most intense use of language, everything that is potentially meaningful. E-poetry is poetry with or within the digital media. So he also makes a list of diverse websites that you can surf. For example, you've got Electronic Literature Collection, Volume 1 and 2, Poems That Go, the Jim Andrews website, and also the bot that publishes creations on social media like Twitter, and his own website. And so Leonardo Flores's website, I Love E-Poetry, with 31 years of the tradition. So he also takes the example, and that's quite interesting, I think, to start with, the example of several computer-made poems. For example, Seattle Drift by Jim Andrews, 1997. Jim Andrews is a programmer poet, and in his poem, the reader is interactive, is performing the poem, because anyone can add behavior to a digital text. And of course, you would have guessed that there is a code behind the movement of the poem. The text requests the reader to do it. So that's why it's a bad poem in the end, ironically speaking. It's bad because it's restlessly moving, drifting down the page. It's unreadable. But it can also change from a concrete poem or from an 18th century concrete poem to a graphic poem, to an animated poem, then to e-poetry. Because even if the poem is scattered, I think it's better. You can stop it, you can discipline the text. Then he mentions another interesting poem, Taroko Gorge by Nick Montfort, a very famous computer poet. It's a nature poem about a canyon generated by a JavaScript source code. You will have, I suppose you've seen that the lines cascade down the page. You can't stop reading. You cannot scroll up or down, contrary to the previous example. I think it's a meditative poem about nature generated by a computer. And it describes, in fact, the true Taroko Gorge National Park in Taiwan. And it produces endless combinations of words and elements, like stones, creeks, etc., the creek, etc. It imitates the endless, uncontrollable, passive time. The river is the poem. You never swim in the same river, so you never experiment the same poem twice. And I think it marvelously recreates the idea of perpetual change in nature. Another interesting aspect that Leonardo Flores discusses is the fact that digital texts are different from static texts because we invited to embrace the emergence of new native poetic forms. People can repurpose this form as the poem is made from a computer code. So literary traditions can continue but can adapt to this new media. People have to learn how to write on these new spaces. people have to learn how to read also within these emerging forms. And we also urge, of course, to write electronic literature, to go and explore, and to add behavior to any digital text. So the poem is a performative experience. Users can change the way the poem represents the action of moving and drifting. So a poem is made of a regulated movement, but also of randomness. And we'll get back to this idea later on.